All right, everybody. So welcome back. If you saw the first video in this two-part series about creating a simple user form in Microsoft Excel, you will have known we set this little button up to open our form. If we click that, we've got this simple email form, and it's very stripped down. I'm trying to keep it basic. Just want to show you the basic concepts of number one, creating a user form, and number two, which is what this video is about, is actually passing those values into a worksheet and actually making this a functional form. So as of right now, if I type in the information, I can click on enter, but nothing happens. So that's what we're going to do in this video. So without further ado, let's get started. So first thing we want to do is just close this form. Let's go, first of all, let's go to our database worksheet here. We've named it database. I've put in headers here that are basically just the our values that we're passing into the user form: first name, last name, and email. So let's look at this from a conceptual standpoint. So if I add a value, and we'll just use column A here, because that's good enough to kind of establish what we're trying to do. So let me press Control and the down arrow. That gets us all the way to the very last row in our worksheet, which if we note here, it's row 1,048,576. Well, that's important. We're going to remember that because we're going to use that value in our code here in a minute. So if I get down to the bottom, now what I can do is Control up arrow, and notice that it goes to the last row in column A that has data. So let me just prove that to you. So if I added another string here, another name, I could do Control down. Again, we're down to the very last row, and Control up again. And now it stops at row 3. So this is very important. It's actually very useful. This is a good way to establish. We can set up a variable that's going to establish the next available row that we can pass the values from our user form in a dynamic fashion. And what we really need to do is not go to the last row of data. We need to go to the next row, and I'm going to show you how to do that right now. All right, so now I'm back in the Visual Basic Editor. So I'm going to open my form here. I'm going to double click the email form. And just a reminder, in the first video, remember we used a naming convention to name all of our elements. Our text boxes start with TB, TB last name, TB email, and then our button actually is a command button. So it's CMD enter, and this is actually important because we're going to use these names in our code. So the way we want to start our code is we want to use a click event. So when we click enter, we want to take the values from our text boxes and pass those to our database worksheet. So I'm going to double click the enter button, and what it's going to do is start a private sub procedure for me called private sub CMD enter _click, and it's basically a click event for our command button. So let me make some space here. The first thing I need to do is declare a couple of variables. I'm going to dimension WS as worksheet, and that's going to be our database worksheet. So now I need to set that equal to this workbook. And then sheets database. And so our sheet name needs to be in double quotes, in parentheses. And so we've got that set. So the next variable we need to set is our next row. I'm just going to call it next row. And I'm going to set declare that as data type long. And since that's not an object, I can just set this without the set keyword, next row equals, and that's going to be WS, since we've established that as our variable for the database worksheet. And then I'm going to use range A 1048,576, remember, which is the very last row in column A. So I'm going to use end XL up to get us to the last row in our list. And end XL up is basically recreating that command up arrow action that we used from the very last row in column A. And then what I want is the row. I want the row number. So dot row gives me the row number of that last row with data But then remember, I want it to be the next available row that's blank, so I'm going to have to add 1 to that. So that's how you do that. We just set our next row variable to worksheet, which is our database worksheet, and the range starting from the last row in column A, using end XL up to get to the last data row in our list and establish what row that is, and then add 1 to that to get to the next available row. And it's really that simple. And this right here dynamically allows you to add the data from your user form to the list every time. So this is a great little concept. So we've got that established. Now let's start passing data from our user form to the database worksheet. So in our database worksheet, we've got 3 columns. We got first name, last name, and email, and it's columns A, B, and C, remember? So what we just basically need to do is say cell A next row is going to be equal to the value in the text box that has first name, which remember the name was TB first name. So let's do that. So it's going to be worksheet range A, and then we're going to concatenate. So we're going to close that double quote for A, and then we're going to use the ampersand to concatenate that with the next row variable value. So remember, next row is long data type, which is numeric. So this is basically saying the range on our worksheet, database worksheet A, and whatever the next row is where we want to place the value. And we do that by dot value. We want the value of that cell to be the value that's in the text box first name in our form. So that's how that works. So we just need to repeat this for the next 2 values. So I'm just going to Control C, Control V twice, and then I'm going to just adjust things as necessary. So column B is going to be our last name. So we just want to change a few things here. And then column C is our email. And this is where it's kind of important that you kind of establish a naming convention for your user form elements, because it makes it real easy to, if you got to, repeat some code like this. So we've written the code that's going to pass the values from our user form to the appropriate cell in our database worksheet. So let's test this out, make sure it works. I'm going to click save real quick. Then I'm going to close the VB editor. Let's go to sheet 1. Let's open our form, and let me type in the values again. Click enter. And so our user form looks just like it did before, but let's go to the database worksheet, or let me close the form. And notice here it did pass the values just as we planned. So everything's working great on that side of things, but we do have a problem, right? When we click enter, the form won't close. So we can go in and we can put some code in to make that work. So let's go back to the VB editor. And in our code here, what we're going to do, it's as simple as saying me.hide. Me is a keyword that means the user form that we're in. So let me go ahead and save that. Let's go back. Let's try this again. Let's open the form. Let's say and then we'll click enter, and now it closes for us, and we go to the database, and we see that it's now added the new data to the next available row dynamically, just like we coded it. So I hope you find that to be pretty cool. One more thing, I just want to make sure. So we have another issue here. So sometimes when you reopen the form, the values from the previous use remain in the user form, and we can actually fix that too with our code. So let's go to the Visual Basic Editor one last time. And what we want to do is, let me do this in front of the me.hide. What we want to do is we want to take all of these values in our user form, and we just want to clear them. So we can copy and paste this, and then just double quotes with no spaces establishes a blank in that. So we just repeat this. It's really that simple. So if you're looking for a way to make sure that your form is cleared out for the next time that it's opened for use, this is a simple way of doing that. So I'm just going to Finish that. And let's save that and close that, and we open the form. It should be clear for us. Let's try one last time to double check things. Let's test it. And click enter, and let's test. And sure enough, it did add it to our list. And if we go back to sheet 1, open our form, it's clear, ready for the next user. So that's how you take that form that we created in the first video and you basically wire it up so it works and it passes those values to your database worksheet. I hope that helps. I hope you find that useful. I hope you learned something new. Thanks everybody for watching. Please take a minute to like and subscribe, and be sure to check us out at theaccidentalexcellist.com.